Hey guys, today's guest on Quarantine with Coaches is a veteran coach. He's about to enter his 24th season this fall in coaching. His second year as special teams coordinator and defensive line coach at Robert Morris University in Chicago. Coach Bill Lund. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing great, Tim. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Just talked. I'm going a little stir crazy. This will be officially day one without any Diet Coke in the house. My plan is to go a whole day without Diet Coke. We'll see how that goes. But
good luck.
Everyone's got their own battles to fight, and this is mine today.
Yeah.
So, hey, 23 years of coaching. Can you just talk about some of the different places you've been at this point now?
Well, it's interesting. My start in coaching was at St. Anselm College, and it was a startup program at the time. They had dropped football back post World War II, and decided to bring it back in '96 and '97 was our first year. So, they were looking for some part-time coaches. I was looking to get into coaching. $1,500 seemed like a sweet deal at the time. I was working a bunch of odd jobs just to be able to do that. But it was a unique experience because I got to see a program built from the ground up. We didn't have anything to sell as far as schools or facilities, weight room, just basically selling pictures in a dream of what we wanted to become. And so that was unique because, the head coach at the time too was a first-year head coach. And, I remember him sitting me down and saying, hey, you got to recruit like your life depends on it, because it does. And then he just set me on my way. He didn't tell me how I needed to. He just, it was good because he let me figure things out, good, bad, or indifferent. But it was a unique experience nonetheless. And then that just helped myself get into that first full-time opportunity at Colby College. And then it's just been, growth and trying to climb the ladder. And, when you're young, you're trying to, be at the highest levels. And then now as, I've gotten older, I just want to be at a good place around good people. And, as things come, they come. But, just kind of enjoying my process. But, being at the Division II, Division III levels, FBS, FCS levels, Ivy League, and then, first time here in the NAIA level. And, they've all been great opportunities in terms of the development process and meeting with a lot of different coaches and a lot of different philosophies, a lot of different styles, that have all been successful for the most part. And then, you learn, the good, bad, and the ugly about things as well. But it's been unique just because I think some of the places I have been around and certainly has given me a broad picture of the coaching realm.
It's awesome. And when you talk about that broad picture, talk about some relationships and how you've been able to build these relationships at these different places. But also, tell me this. Now you're a little bit more veteran coach. How is that building the relationships? How has that evolved too?
I think a lot of times you get into these new places and you're trying to establish those relationships with your players. I think establishing relationships with coaches is fairly easy because at least you can talk football. And then you kind of figure out the nuances. You kind of figure out, coaches' personalities, what they're looking for. That's an easy relationship, I think, in terms of figuring out, what these coaches are wanting. But then, these players, you're new to them. You're just coming into, a situation where, all right, I've got to connect with these guys somehow. And a lot of it is just sitting down and spending time with those guys and, asking them maybe to come into your office like, hey, what's your major? Where are you from? What are your interests? What are your careers? And trying to develop a little bit of rapport in asking them questions. And so everywhere I've been, it's been about just trying to get a little bit of information on these guys. And when I'm younger, you just kind of ask them, hey, what are your major? What's your favorite, video game? Do you have a girlfriend? And over the course of time, you start asking them, what your career opportunities are, why do you play football? And you start learning to dig deeper, I think as you learn and mature. But, for the most part, it's spending a lot of time with the kids, understanding, what they want to do. Because for a lot of these kids, they love football, but it's, maybe a number 4 on their priority list, because they have, academic dreams of, some of the places I've been at were high-end academic schools. So, they want to be a doctor, they want to be an astronaut, they have, high, lofty goals. So, you got to figure out where football is in their importance levels, and not to say it's not important, but they got other dreams and goals. And I think that was some of the things you got to kind of figure out and work yourself through. And then spending time with them outside of the football realm, and you see a lot of guys do this. I know I've noticed, things that you do with your guys, via social media, where you just go out and, hey, we're just going to go out and get a pizza together, just hang out. There's times where, I've had them over and we've cooked out at, wherever I've lived and just grilled out and, played, cornhole or played, backyard games, and just to be around them and just trying to develop those rapports outside of football. And part of that is creating that connection so they know you care. And, you see a lot of coaches talk about it, even all these clinics now where, if kids feel that you care, they're going to listen more, they're going to do more, they're going to do what you ask them to do. And that is an important part, because you can't just come in there and say, hey, I need you to work hard. And, they don't know if you're going to work hard. I think part of the reason why I like doing the strength conditioning stuff is that I'll go in there and I'll work my tail off. And so when I'm asking them, hey, they got to push themselves in the weight room, they see me doing that as well. And it's not to say everybody has to do that, but part of that role, I think you need to do that just so they're buying into what you're saying a little bit. And, the same thing goes for academics. If you got a coach that, hey, I read this book this week, and, a coach that likes to talk about all the different things he reads. Why is coach reading so much? Because I want to learn. And you're just trying to emulate a lot of those things. You want those characteristics of those kids to also emulate. And that's just part of that development of those kids. You just got to dig deep and find out different ways, because every kid's going to be different too. I mean, every kid's going to have a different mentality, a different background. And I think one of the things that over my coaching career that helped me was early on in my part-time career, I worked as a counselor at a juvenile delinquent facility. And I learned quickly that if a kid had a bad day, it wasn't because he was a bad kid. It was because there was something going on in his head, something going on that I didn't know about. And then when you sat down and said, hey, why did this happen? You know what? It was my birthday. My parents didn't call me. I just had a bad day. I didn't handle it. When you just talk them through and you're like, you know what? If I was a kid that was 12 years old and I flipped out because my mom and dad didn't call me on my birthday, I probably got some stuff going on in my head that's tough to process. And so that right there really helped me. Like when a kid's having a bad day at practice, dude, what's going on? This isn't like you. Oh, this is going on in my family. I got this going on. And it's those moments right there where kids really learn to connect, where if you take the time when a kid is not having a normally good day that he has and figure out why is this happening rather than jumping to a conclusion that, oh, hey, he's just, being a jerk today. Those kind of things. It's usually something underlying. You got to peel those layers of the onion back and figure out what's going on. I think that was probably one of the most beneficial things in my early career that helped me along in developing these relationships with these kids. And, when you look at the evolution of that, when I was a young coach, it was, I need to be this fiery brimstone guy. I grew up a Vince Lombardi fan, and you see all those videos where, he's barking these commands and guys are just following him to the ends of the earth. And I'm like, oh, hey, that's coaching. But it wasn't me. And it was my first year at Colby College with the head coach, Tom Austin, sat me down and he's like, you got to coach with your personality and who you are. And what you're doing is not who you are. And then the other thing he said to me too that really stuck was, you can't try to please everybody, because if you do, nobody's happy. But if you please 70% of the people you're talking to, you're ahead of the game. And, he put a number on there, whether it's accurate or not, but it made me think like, hey, you're right. I'm not going to please everybody. But if I'm who I am and I'm honest and I'm not trying to be something I'm not, kids are going to follow you a lot more. And that was probably the biggest part of that evolution of figuring out how to connect with these kids and how to change my mindset. And I had to reflect back on, everybody says coaches are teachers. I grew up, my father was a 40-year veteran teaching high school football, or coaching high school football and teaching high school biology and chemistry. And he got these kids to buy in and listen and do all these things that are difficult. And I look back and he didn't stand up there and bark commands. He just taught. And so when I really look back at those things, that last half of that career is really where I really started to connect with these guys better and really learn more about, how to teach things and how to figure out how kids learn and how they process information and, just try to figure out, what's the best way I can get him to perform. And I can't coach everybody the same way, but I got to look at, Jim this way and Joe that way and Jack this way and figure out each individual nuances of each kid. And that's probably the biggest part of the evolution, is learning that, you can't coach everybody cookie cutter a lot of times, and trying to figure out what's going to get them to learn the things you need them to do to perform. So for me, that was, part of that evolution, part of that coaching process, part of the building of relationships, being that young, immature coach to, where I'm at now. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning different ways to be able to help kids get better. So it's certainly a continuing process.
That's awesome. Really great answer there. The depth and what you went into the evolution, I love it. Can you talk about some of the skills in networking and career building you've learned? Obviously, to have a career in college that is spanned out 23 years, you got to have some skills there with networking and career building. Just talk a little bit about that.
It's interesting. College football is probably the one industry or profession where having a number of different stops isn't necessarily a bad thing. Where, in the corporate world, hey, you worked at these 10 different companies in 10 different years. It's like, why? But in football, there's so many other of these circumstances you can't control. Head coach takes another job. Maybe not everybody goes with them. Staff gets let go. You got to find another job. You jump on an opportunity that, maybe benefits you professionally. All these things kind of, affect, that process. So it's probably more indicative of somebody that's been able to survive the profession, as you could say. And so when I was a young coach, it was trying to go to as many clinics as possible, talk to different guys. And, 20 years ago, it was a little different. You had to, use more email. You could have to call them on the phone and try to figure out times to get up to watch their practices and sit down in the spring ball. Camps were different back then as well. So working a football camp was almost like a interview in a lot of senses, where early on, the Boston College football camp was a 3-day overnight affair, and they'd have 3 sessions back to back to back. And you'd stay overnight between each session there in the dorm. So you're staying with some of these coaches, for long periods of time. I remember working that camp and hanging out with, guys like Jeff Halfley and Ryan Day and guys that are, head coaches now. And we were playing basketball, talking football, and just hanging out. And so spending time with those guys and a lot of other coaches. I've had friends that worked the camp for a number of days. The coach liked them. Job opened up. Hey, I really like what you did at that camp. Would you be interested in interviewing for our position? And it was just a great way to be able to build those. And it's one of those things that's kind of gotten away, because you don't see a lot of these multiple day camps. Everything's the one day. But there's still, even the one days, you can still connect with some guys and maybe, hey, I want to come spend some time with you. So certainly working camps, taking that opportunity to, it's one of the things I love about your camp, the Whitewater camp. You can still work with some, great coaches, learn some football, talk some ball, and I think, even help some younger guys develop along the way. And so there's some guys that, I work with at camp that as things open up, hey, we've got this opportunity, would you be interested in it? So working camps is huge. Spending time writing the notes, I think, is a lost art, where you just write that card. Hey, coach, it was great meeting you the other day. I've got a young a former player of mine who's coaching, and he does it to this day. And I kind of like, hey, yeah, he listened to what I said in terms of just writing that note. Handwritten note is huge. I mean, there's nothing wrong with just shooting a text just to check in on a guy. Those are great. Going to the convention, I think one of the things I did early on in my career is I worked for the registration committee for the AFCA. And so it gave me an opportunity, to be at the registration booth. And there's work to do, don't get me wrong. But it put me in front of every single coach that came in. And so as I see a guy coming in, and I knew a guy maybe that worked for that guy, but I didn't know that guy directly, I'd go up to him and say, hey, so-and-so works for you. I just wanted to say hi and introduce myself. And then a conversation would start. And I've met numerous coaches that way that have helped me along the way, or helped maybe open up some doors from a coaching opportunity. And just taking the time to do that, to sit there and grab a coach by his hand and say, hey, I want to shake your hand and introduce myself. I think that's a little bit of a lost art. But taking advantage of that opportunity where you got a lot of coaches in one spot, and then, visiting spring practices with a staff is huge. I mean, you're spending 2-3 days sometimes with the guys, and they get a chance to really kind of feel you out a little bit. I think those are all just huge tools in terms of letting guys connect and just talking some football. And the big thing too is a lot of times guys will go there and they want to just sound like how smart they are. And I think more often than not, you're better off just listening, asking the appropriate questions, and then not trying to interject, hey, this is what I do. Just take in what you do. And if they ask you, hey, what do you do? Hey, go ahead and then share your vision, your philosophy with that. Because, again, a lot of times these guys are trying to learn as well. So I think some of those tools like sending the cards, working the camps, those are all huge in terms of developing the network. And nowadays, I think this is a great way now too. I mean, I think this is going to open up the door for future where, hey, coach, can I Zoom meeting with you and just talk some football with you? I can't make it out to California, but I really like what you do. And a coach taking 30 minutes maybe to talk with you about some drills and skills. I think this is, again, the silver lining in terms of the coaching world where we can create some opportunities to be able to develop a network and meet other coaches.
It's awesome. Hey, we'll finish up here with rapid fire. And, we ask one sentence or less on these. So, favorite position you've coached?
Linebackers.
Go. The best player you've coached?
Khalil Mack.
He's pretty good. Best book you've read recently?
Best book I read is the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Good. What's been your go-to quarantine meal?
The go-to quarantine meal has been anything that wifey makes.
Well, you're on easy street there, man. Final one, best or maybe biggest mentor in your life, coaching or otherwise.
I have to say, too, it's been my college football coach, Rick Coles, and then Ed Mystery, who was the head coach I worked for. Really, too, Ed Mystery and Tom Austin were both head coaches at Colby College when I was there.
Awesome. Bill, thanks for your time today. I appreciate all the knowledge you dropped here in Quarantine with Coaches.
Hey, thank you, Tim. I appreciate the time, man.